we're going to start the second session. It's ensuring biometric recognition in secure and works well for all as case study. And we're going to bring up on stage Greg, Paul, Ajay, and Chris up to stage. And we're going to talk about it. I apologize for the confusion. I was just using the app. And for those on the stream, yes, there is a session.
Where our audience has gone.
I don't know which agenda is correct, which is not at this point, so I apologize. I was going from the digital. I went with the digital track, so apologies. So have a seat, and let's start.
Okay, we might as well get started. First of all, thanks for staying. Appreciate your attendance for us. It's to me, it's a very, this session really builds off Chris's just last session, and we're talking but specifically about biometrics and the innovation that we've done over the past, I don't know, many years to drive the right balance between practical, cost-effective evaluation requirements and evaluation that's useful and valuable to our relying parties and to our customers. So the title of our panel today is Ensuring Biometric Recognition is Secure and Works for All. I'm going to briefly let my panel introduce themselves, starting with Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. My name is Chris Allgrove. I'm a co-founder director at Ingenium Biometric Laboratories. So we're one of the set of FIDO accredited test labs that deliver test services in support of the various in our case, biometrics and remote identification certification programs.
Thank you, Paul.
My name is Paul Heim. I'm the Director of Certification for FIDO Alliance, so I take the wonderful requirements that our members come to consensus about and operationalize certification programs around those requirements. One of them being our biometric and our identity verification programs.
Thank you, Paul. And Ajay?
Hi, my name is Ajay Amlani. I'm with iProov. I'm the head of the Americas. iProov is a company that verifies that there is a live human being in front of the camera at the time. It sounds somewhat trivial to think about, but it's actually one of the hardest things to be able to do in today's day and age of being able to digitally insert photos that are live and created, even videos. And so what we do is we use the light from a cell phone screen to reflect against your face and back into the camera at the same time to be able to verify humanness.
Thank you. I was going to get right into it. So first of all, I will start off with something. Passwords suck. They are poor entropy, dictionary attacks, phishing, breaches shared across people and sites. And FIDO is an interoperable platform for innovation for everybody along those lines to really drive the convenience and security curve. And we've been doing that for a long time. Biometrics is a key part of that. I think a lot of us who are using authenticators often use it on a platform. You're used to using a biometric to unlock it, maybe even unlock a transaction, and then you're using some sort of a FIDO authenticator, hopefully, to gain access to a relying party's site without passwords, and that value is stronger and stronger every day, especially with passkeys. But and the biometric certification requirements are a key part of that in terms of trying to build trust associated with how our consumers use our products. I'm going to start off with a question for Paul. So the biometric component certification has been a key part of the certification for FIDO authentication. And we have a new certification program that Chris Cortez mentioned briefly about face verification for remote identity verification. What's new about this program that I think you could call out and highlight to the people here, and how is it different from our current program?
Yeah, so our current and still active program, the biometric component program, was really geared towards multiple modalities, measuring their efficacy, their performance. However, our new IDV program builds on the IDV work that FIDO has been working on for the last 3-4 years. And builds upon our phase 1, which was document authenticity. And now we're looking at the face verification component of that, specifically around both the matching efficacy as well as the liveness element. We've also added in performance testing around differential demographic groups for equity. It's geared towards the remote IDV implementation versus maybe a biometric sensor that is integrated into a hardware authenticator like a fingerprint sensor. And we're very pleased. We launched this program back in June of this year, and we have a lot of interest around it, especially because it was rounding out our first end-to-end sort of measurement of a remote IDV solution that may integrate in both that document reader aspect as well as that face verification biometric aspect.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything?
I'm happy to jump in, yeah. So I think the difference between the biometric component certification program and the face recognition part of remote identification is largely around biometric component is authentication. So there's an enrollment process, kind of things familiar from when you get a new phone and you have to hold your phone up and do lots of capture. It builds a model of your face and it stores that model within the device or possibly on a remote solution, and then you authenticate against it. So that's a very specific use case. The remote IDV solution is another very specific use case. This time, the reference isn't a model that may be quite sophisticated and built up for multiple exposures. It's an image from some sort of document. And it's a very different type of technical challenge in trying to match against a different type of image. You might not get, or you wouldn't get access to three-dimensional information. You can't build up a complex model. It's a simple snapshot of somebody's photograph. It might be from an NFC readable chip, so it's quite good quality, or it might be an optical scan of a driving license. So it's a much more challenging type of verification or matching challenge. And I think that's at the core of what we're specifically trying to do in evaluating the face matching component for remote identification.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Ajay, iProov was one of the first to actually complete this very difficult technical challenge and the certification for the new program. Tell me what value it brings to you and your customers.
Sure, I think first off, there's a simple kind of saying, right, which is garbage in, garbage out. And if you're not able to really evaluate and test your tokens or your passkeys up front to verify that the individual is who they say they are, that becomes a really big challenge down the road. That means you've just opened up a massive gaping hole of vulnerability into the system where a person can be able to access your system across the whole enterprise. And in addition to that, there's also rebinding of the tokens. Obviously, people don't hold on to the same devices all the time. Devices change, devices move, people leave an organization, new people join. And so there needs to be a significant amount of work up front in the identity verification side of things. Now, the challenge is in a digital world, it's very hard to be able to verify that an individual is in fact a live human in front of the camera. They could be operating quite remotely. You've heard a number of different people that have been able to join companies from North Korea or from other adversaries, being able to trick hirers and be able to join organizations. And so doing a verification up front on the face and matching it to the individual's identity is an extremely important component of the overall security of the system. For us, yes, it was a difficult process. Ingenium is not an easy testing lab to be able to get through. They are a fantastic lab, and they have extremely hard standards to be able to rigorously test all biometrics for evaluation and completeness. And so for us, we thought it was a very important investment for our customers, many of whom are looking at trying to deploy FIDO and passkeys, many of whom have it in their product roadmap today. And so for us, it's easier to sell into existing projects when a company has an existing set of engineers working on a project, as opposed to pie-in-the-sky style deployments. And so for us, FIDO is something that is, in fact, at the majority of product roadmaps for major companies out there today. So it was very important for us.
Thank you. I'm going to keep on this topic for remote identity verification. I mean, it's a fairly new, recent part of our biometric certification requirements recently, and so we're very excited about kind of the future opportunities and use cases that we think that this this technology, and right, like you mentioned, hiring. What kind of maybe anyone kind of think, what do you think is sort of the more interesting use cases on the horizon that we think FIDO authenticators and remote identification can be useful for?
Sure, I can take that briefly, right? I mean, I think in general, biometrics, while they've been in place for a very long time and have been operational for a very long time. Only over the last few years have we actually seen consumers really start to gravitate towards it. If you ask the average consumer today how many times they actually use biometrics, it's probably about 15 or 20 to unlock their phones or their devices. Historically, you'd probably get an answer of 0. And so if you think about how fast biometrics have really been able to grow within the consumer mindset, people are starting to really ask for them now. People are actually starting to demand them now. And so across various use cases now, people are already using biometrics. Healthcare, financial services. Now, while these are sometimes just restricted to the individual phones that they have, that's starting to be able to be a pretty significant point of vulnerability. Being able to do it over the cloud gives you access to attacker data. When they are actually trying to attack the systems, you can now continuously build and analyze and leverage AI to be able to improve the system. This is a cat and mouse game. Attackers are getting a lot of funding through various ways of ransomware and other types of financial gain, and they're investing it. They're not just spending it on yachts, they're actually investing it back into the system to be able to continue to get better. So some of the best engineers in the world are now working on systems to try to attack these types of applications.
So I'll pick up on that.
Yeah.
I've got 2 dates. September 2013, possibly, I think it's the 26th of September, Apple launched Touch ID. On that day, my life changed. I don't have an iPhone, but it's all changed. We went from being a relatively niche area, so as AJ says, people kind of didn't really use it much. If you did, it probably was when you travel, and the algorithms were okay. Heathrow used to be slightly ropey with the e-gates. Is the older technology is in development. They're on the cusp of a lot of underlying technology developments. But when Touch ID was launched, everybody suddenly accepted it. Everybody was using it. People with iPhones, it became ubiquitous almost overnight. All the other handsets manufacturers started developing their own solutions. We had some innovation. Some stuff was quite ahead of its game almost, like trying to do iris on a mobile phone was always going to be challenging. But that's for authenticating. That was on device. FIDO embraced that and developed test standards around that. I kind of say February 2020 is another significant date. So that's when COVID struck. And we were seeing a lot of use cases of use or new use cases for biometrics in the form of travel corridors, frictionless travel, low friction travel. But with COVID, suddenly everybody was working from home. Everybody wanted to have blended working practices. You wanted to avoid being around people too much. So remote identity verification really, I was working in UK government at the time. In 2 days, they had something like 5 million people trying to access government services to get universal credit, so social service payments. At one point, the waiting list to get on the website was 100 years. Let alone get processed. So we had to source, develop, or source, procure, and implement a remote identity verification process very, very quickly. And then, as an example of how that really kick-started the type of applications that we're talking about here. So government services is a really, really big one. So there are multiple projects within the UK, across Europe, across the US, around the world, looking at accessing government services, doing this remote identity verification. The banking industry have embraced it a number of years ago. There's a lot of stuff around that. Travel then is now coming back again. So 2019, the travel industry, the airport industry, the airlines were all pushing really hard for this pre-enrollment, remote enrollment to help facilitate travel because airports were full to bursting and they couldn't keep adding new terminals, couldn't keep adding runways, but they needed to use technology to make things work better. And we come back to that now. And so we're seeing, this year we are seeing significant interest across a range of areas in travel in particular. So
Yeah, you hit on almost all the ones I was expecting to talk on. That's very good. I was kind of curious. When I first heard about this, we had some interest from relying parties for helping to just help generate the initial account. So especially in industries where you had to know your customer and not having to have some sort of a face-to-face enrollment. And we don't unfortunately have a relying party up here, but I'm also potentially excited about that potential value for our biometric certification. And I'm also very proud of just the fundamental framework that we have to actually use our technology to actually address those use cases. I'm going to pivot to bias. So so you might know that we addressed bias over the past year and a half in our biometric certification requirements, largely in response to sort of just increasing public pressure and political demand. In some cases, might call out the FTC for their notice back in 2023 associated with driving, assuring that there's equity and fairness in the biometric authenticator space. And so we have an optional certification. We have an optional certification and biometric requirements that laboratories can evaluate authenticators for on a variety of factors like gender or age or some way ethnicity. So we have this regulator pressure. I'm curious if there's any, if anyone has anything to share from actual customers who have voiced concerns about bias on their biometric authenticators, and just open the floor. And it might be an open-ended question, but I'm hoping that we have something to share along these lines.
So all of our customers care about it. So from a vendor perspective, and a while ago the vendors started to say, yeah, matching's kind of solved. But then the NIST report came out and it circles around. All of our customers really care about being able to demonstrate equality of outcome and fairness in the implementation. And it's partly out of fear. So if they get negative publicity, if the statutory oversight flags them as implementing something that is not treating everybody equally, then that's a big issue for them. And reputational damage, possibly even some sorts of financial issues for them, and generally how they're seen in the market. So I think it's a defensive thing in some ways. But then we do see some of our vendors who approach us, or the discussions we have with vendors, where actually it's an opportunity, they're confident that their system works well. So it kind of reflects how testing has two sides of a coin. It can be protecting yourself, it can be, well, we are compliant, we aren't unfair in any particular way. Or it's actually, hey, we're really not, we're really fair, we're really good at this. And it's an opportunity to sell the product, to have a positive story to tell, rather than a slightly more defensive, negative story. And I think that's important. And so having FIDO, having the optional test capability is a really important thing to be able to support the market. And both from our reliant party customers and from our vendor customers, it's seen as a very important process to explore and understand and put their products through.
Couldn't agree more. Anything
I would
else
add that it's the number one indicator of the growth in inquiries over our program. It's the question we get the most now. Now that this program is live, now that we've added this additional optional testing into both the biometric component as well as the IDV face certification programs, the amount of interest around this has grown quite a lot in comparison to just what we saw for the evolution of our biometric component program for the 4.5 years that it's been around.
Yeah, for iProov takes this topic extremely seriously. We define bias beyond gender, age, skin color. We actually go into socioeconomic status. We go into physical capabilities. We go into cognitive capabilities. I mean, if you think the average CAPTCHA today, like when you see a CAPTCHA and you have to try to solve a puzzle, or you have to try to understand what's a seaplane versus a normal plane, like these are not inclusive, right? People don't have the ability to be able to solve these anymore today, and they're getting harder and harder. The interesting part about biometrics applied to this is actually that everyone is really born with biometrics. They do have biometrics, whether it's different forms of biometrics. And so inherently, it provides a capability to be to have phenomenal protection against bias if technology is developed appropriately. The problem is technology, and biometrics in particular, have really been limited in terms of the types of faces that they had access to when training the technology. So early on, it was really mislabeled as a technology that has bias issues. And in reality, it isn't. If it's built by people that you can trust and it's tested by organizations like FIDO, who really do take it to the nth degree in terms of being able to verify that the technology is inclusive. So from our perspective, additional testing and standards are necessary. We applaud FIDO. We wanted to be the first ones through because we wanted to be able to support FIDO through this effort. And I think this is an important component for everybody to look into, is whether or not your technology that you choose to deploy is in fact inclusive, or are you building in ways to exclude.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I mean, this really goes to, I guess, again, the innovation that not just the authenticators and relying parties and the platforms have been providing, but also, the requirements in the laboratories to address this issue for our customers and for our regulators as well. So, I don't know if anyone has had any interaction with some regulators associated with the FIDO bias certification and the fact that we are, sort of a continuous improvement. Everyone's trying to become more and more responsible on a range of issues, not just including bias, and FIDO is affording them that opportunity to, as you say, not just be defensive, but to show how seriously they address the problem. And so I think it's an opportunity to continue to demonstrate how FIDO is addressing the needs of the customers and the regulators, vendors, authenticators. Very proud of that activity, and it is a continuous improvement process. We will continue. We start here, baby steps. We will continue to drive improvements, whether it's PAD for digital injection and all of the AI attacks that are coming at us, or improvements in the way we evaluate authenticators and for the benefits of our customers. We are almost out of time. I want to thank the panel, and I want to have some time for questions. So. Dean.
Hey, Greg. Excuse me. Dean Sachs from Beyond Identity. There was recently a GSA study published around bias in identity verification, online identity verification. I think 5 vendors, one of the vendors had like a 50% failure rate, and there were wide-ranging biases shown in most of the vendors. One vendor in particular did fairly well. How do you see, and this is to the entire panel, how do you see this work, the biometric certifications coming out of FIDO and the work that the 3 of you are doing, 4 of you are doing, changing that moving forward? Because obviously that study showed some fairly significant failures that certainly will push people away from using this market until we can get to a state of better, of less bias and better resolution in that identity verification process.
Thanks, Dean. Anyone want to take that? I'm happy to, but yeah, go ahead.
So testing is really, really important, and I think the value that the FIDO test program offers is it's an industry body who's delivered this test requirements, the test standard. And there's a range of eminent people who are involved in that process, from government, from industry, from academia, from the test lab community. And so what we have produced with the FIDO test standard, I strongly believe, is a really good set of requirements for testing. Now, the challenge is evangelizing that and getting the industry, getting it to the point where it is seen as, you've got an identity product, you need to go and get FIDO tested. And we're getting there, there's progress, we're moving in the right direction. The flip side is if people aren't getting tested, it should be, why aren't you testing?
Yeah.
You've got something to hide? Is your system not working well enough? Like, every single biometric system I've ever encountered is 99.99% accurate. If I'm talking to, if they aren't saying our system's really good, it's accurate, it's fair, they won't make any sales. But it's challenging that in a constructive way, is not saying, oh, you must be telling a lie, you're not telling the truth. It's providing that quantitative evidence, and having these tests will help push the standards up, will help the good companies shine, because they will be able to demonstrate how they conform to this type of rigorous testing, and really give a strong demonstration of what good looks like, how to achieve that demonstration of goodness, and really, and I think that will go a long way to solving a lot of these problems.
Yep. Just to address that point, the GSA
Ajay,
study, I think is...
Sorry, we're running out of time. The next session is coming up, and it's your sponsor session.
Can I answer this
Can
I answer this one question really quick? GSA picked 5 vendors that were only IDV vendors. They picked no biometrics vendors. They did not know how to make the study. It was not a well opened up study, and I find it kind of interesting the way that they actually pursued this. I applaud the fact that they're studying it. I think their selection process needed to be better evaluated.
It was
Great.
more volunteer
Thank you for the
process.
answers.
Thanks.
Thank you,
They
Dean.
volunteered to do the study. So thank you, the panelists. Sorry for the confusion earlier on, but I did give you 2 extra minutes. But I do have to respect the schedule, and actually the next session is a sponsor session from Ajay's company. So I want to make sure that you guys get a fair share.